Do you want to introduce recent acquisitions?
Okay.
No. Rachel goes on strike.
I can do it.
No, it's okay.
Shut up, Kelly. Oh.
You're welcome. I've created a blooper this time.
Yes, congrats. Hi, I'm Julia.
I'm Rachel,
And I'm Kelly.
And this is What You Should Read.
the podcast where we should all over our books.
Happy National Book Lovers Day, Kelly and Rachel.
And to you.
And to our listeners.
Yeah.
I must admit I didn't know it was National Book Lovers Day until Kelly told me right before we started recording.
I'm really lucky in that basically everybody I know who knows me at all, pretty much, will tell me, oh, hey, it's August 9th, that's National Book Lovers Day.
Every day is Book Lovers Day in my house.
I mean, same.
Yeah.
But this is the day when everybody celebrates, I guess. So it's really nice that I have friends who do that. Specifically, I don't know if he listens, but my friend John, who made sure I found out about 20 minutes ago.
I feel as though we should petition to make this a bigger holiday,
Yes.
a bigger deal. Everyone should buy each other books on this day. Just do it.
Agreed.
Did you know in Iceland on Christmas Eve, everyone gives each other a book and they stay up all night reading? That's a tradition in Iceland. I love that.
It's books and chocolate. Like, you stay up all night reading and eating chocolate. It is the best idea.
It's perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah. Dorian and I did that last year or a couple years ago when we were home for Christmas, and it was great.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah. Oh, well, Rachel, what are you reading this week?
So I'm still making my way through The Dove Keepers by Alice Hoffman. I just haven't had that much time to read this week, so I'm not quite done. I'm more than halfway though, and I'm still loving it. And my current audiobook is called How to Survive a Plague, the inside story of how citizens and science tamed AIDS. It's written by David France, and it's a really long one. It's like 24 hours long, but it's just, I mean, during the whole, like, when the AIDS pandemic was just like killing so many people and the government wasn't funding research, just citizens rose up and educated themselves on immunology and, you know, scientific research, and they advocated for, you know, new therapies and new research. And I mean, it's because of like just these, you know, normal everyday people who didn't want to die and keep seeing their friends dying, you know, came together. And you know, when the government wouldn't help, and they just said, fine, we'll do it ourselves. And now HIV AIDS is a manageable disease with a normal lifespan expectancy, and so they're just heroes. So I'm really excited to really get into the meat of it. I'm only about an hour into it, but.
That sounds good. I had a boss once whose wife was one of the researchers looking for an AIDS cure. Yeah, somewhere in the Boston area. And I was always, this was, gosh, 12 years ago, maybe 12 or 13 years ago. So it was definitely better by then, but they were still looking for treatments and cures. And so, yeah, obviously now it's much better, but that sounds really interesting. Yeah. Kelly, what are you reading?
I am about halfway into The Night Swim by Megan Golden, which is about a podcaster who is trying to solve the mysterious death of a teenage girl 25 years before. And everybody, the police and other town officials, say that it was a drowning, but her sister insists that she was murdered. So she's trying to solve that. And there's also a Brock Turner type rape trial going on in the town at the same time.
Whoa.
It's very good so far. I am very, very invested. So I'm hoping to see where it goes and finish it today.
Cool.
On this, our holy day, National Book Lovers Day.
Our mom got that in her Book of the Month box. Ordered that one.
Well,
Was it one of the options this month?
it was. I actually picked it, and my box has not arrived yet, but as it happens, I need to be more judicious in checking my pre-orders because I also pre-ordered it for my Kindle. But that's good because now I'm reading it and I don't have to wait for whenever that box feels like showing up.
My box hasn't shown up either.
We probably should edit this out, but mine showed that it was delivered to the distribution center, so it's marked delivered, but at the distribution center, and it's been there for like 4 days.
Whoa.
I'm not pleased. I've contacted the post office. I'm waiting for them to get back to me.
Listeners, just flood Book of the Month with complaints on Kelly's behalf.
Oh God, please don't.
Well, I'm still listening to Rodham by Curtis Sittenfeld on audiobook. I'm about halfway through, and it's really good. It's making me just a little queasy to listen to it, though, with recent, discoveries of the Jeffrey Epstein case and Bill Clinton, and just thinking about the things that she's writing about, the events. It's like, oh, man. But it's still really interesting, an interesting premise to think about. And I just started The Wicker King by Kay Ankrum, and it's a YA novel, and I just started it this morning. I finished The Deep this week also by River Solomon. So good. Everyone has to read it. Thank you, Rachel, for the recommendation. It was just incredible. The themes and how much was packed into such a short book was fantastic. And then The Wicker King, it's about two boys named Jack and August, and they're best friends. And it starts with this really just sort of incredible thing that happened. There was a fire, and Jack is in an asylum, and you're not exactly sure why, right? And so now it's going to go back in time and sort of lead up to what happened there. So it definitely grabbed me right off the bat, and I love Kay Ankrum and her writing style, so I'm excited I'll probably read most of it today on this, our National Book Lovers Day.
Okay, so now is where we talk about, we need to come up with a better name for this, I think.
Okay.
But where
we should put it to our listeners, any suggestions for book news, or did you hear about this?
Yeah, exactly.
Did you hear about this? I thought this, or are you saying you want better than that?
I feel like probably it's me, but we need to come up with a consistent name, which means Kelly remember. But anyway, listeners don't really engage with us, so maybe it's time you start pulling your weight and give us a name.
Name this segment.
Yes. Kathy, you especially are clever. I would like suggestions soon, please.
Whoa, naming names.
We could do a Twitter poll.
Yes.
Oh, we could. Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, I have the best. Did you hear about this news? And actually, I know you have because we were texting about it. But Jasmine Guillory's first 3 books have been optioned for movies and TV. I don't think it was all the same thing, like the same acquisition by the same people.
Really?
And I couldn't find more information about it because I think she announced it on the Today Show when she was interviewed, but I really don't even care. I'm just excited. I don't know who's doing it. I don't know when I can expect to see them, but I am all in. And I finished Party of 2, which I loved. So hopefully that and Royal Holiday will be coming, to be adapted soon too.
Her books are such gems.
They're just so delightful, and Party of 2 especially, I love that Max just digs so deep into inequalities and things, and for a white guy, I found it really refreshing how just aware he was of everything. And it wasn't preachy, it wasn't an issues book, but at the same time, like, they had these little conversations about criminal justice reform. And I just, it was amazing.
I love how she weaves in politics into all of her books, and human rights and racial inequality, and just a lot of her, most of her lead characters, I think all of them are Black women, and just talking about how much harder they have to work in order to be seen as, you know, as good as a man, which is BS. But she just is so good at putting that in, and then still having these fun romance novels that you just gobble up.
Yeah, I would agree. For Party of Two especially, it's like, come for all of the cake talk and stay, because conversations with Max and Olivia make you a better person.
Absolutely. Well, did you hear about this? Stephanie Meyer's finally published Midnight Sun, the companion novel to Twilight, which is basically, I guess, Twilight, but written from Edward's perspective. So this published last week on the 4th, and I haven't read it yet. I probably won't. It's 750 pages. I've read Twilight, and I think if I reread the Twilight series, I would probably have a much different perspective on the books than I do now, than I did then, rather. Especially issues of representation of Indigenous people, and representations of an unhealthy, abusive relationship. And I don't begrudge anyone who loves those books. I loved them when I read them when I was younger as well. But yeah, it's just weird to me that we're still getting Twilight books, and maybe we should not.
I feel like this year has been just, I don't think anyone would disagree with me when I say this year has been an absolute hellscape.
Yeah.
But, you know, with horrible things happening, but at the same time, we're getting all these amazing things that we didn't think we would get. Like, I got to see a new Parks and Rec. I got to see a new 30 Rock, which was mostly a commercial for NBC shows, but every so often my beloved Liz Lemon popped up, and it was just such a delight. There's a new Hunger Games book, there's a new Twilight book, and even if it's not your fandom, there is something for everybody. There was a new Taylor Swift CD that nobody knew about, and it's just great. And I hope Midnight Sun breaks all the records, because money from that is going to help publishing and get books that maybe I'm more interested in out there. So
that's a good point. And
I'm super happy with all of it.
I definitely don't want to yuck anyone's yum. You know, if you're excited to read Midnight Sun, great. It's just, I actually read an article with Stephanie Meyer, and she even said in that interview, I wish I could be remembered for writing The Host.
Yes. we all wish that, because I loved The Host.
I love The Host too, and The Chemist. Both of her non-Twilight books are so good.
Right, exactly. And she even said in that interview, but let's be real, I'm going to be remembered for Twilight. So perhaps she has evolved in her thinking, but I just, you know, I was listening to a reviewer who pointed out that everyone in the book who's described as beautiful has alabaster skin, and just like there's no positive representations of people of color. Even the character of Jacob, like he's positively represented in the beginning, but then turns very aggressive and mean towards Bella, and then imprints on a baby, which just also brings up a lot of problematic representation. So there's a lot of issues with it, and it's a story that a lot of people love and a lot of people gobbled up, myself included. But you know, our recent conversation about Eleanor and Park just made me think we do need to talk about, when we talk about these books that we all love, we should also talk about the things about them that aren't so great, just so that they aren't taken at face value.
Right. No, absolutely. These are important questions, and are important conversations and questions. And I think they're conversations we need to have. But also, I think there are valid concerns about Twilight, and I think there are a lot of people who are being unnecessarily awful about it because it's a book that's beloved by girls and women.
Right. No,
and
that's
both
true.
of those things are true.
Yep.
So.
Definitely.
For sure. I mean, yeah, I totally agree about having these conversations. I mean, we could do a 3-part episode on the Harry Potter series and all the problematic representation in those books, not even including the author's like Twitter rants.
Yeah, you're so right.
There's so much, but you know. Yes.
I would also like to point out that isn't Stephanie Meyer Mormon? But she's actively religious, I'm pretty sure. And you know who I haven't heard make a nonsense comment about trans people? Stephanie Meyer.
That's a good point. Yep. Oh, man.
All right. Well, did you hear about this? So this takes us back to part 1 of our Books by Black Authors episode, which I was unfortunately unable to participate in because of my surgery. But
I wonder if they'll do a part 2.
I don't know. Good question, Julia. But Ta-Nehisi Coates' Between the World and Me, which has already been adapted to the stage, is now being adapted for the screen. For HBO is going to do a special production that's going to include things from the stage production, readings from the book, and also kind of documentary style things from it. And Ta-Nehisi Coates is one of the executive producers. And Camilla Forbes, who's the director of the Apollo Theater, is also directing the adaptation to HBO.
Wow. That's
Awesome.
great.
Okay, so next we're going to talk about recent acquisitions. So Julia, what do you have?
Okay, this is very exciting because my library is now doing curbside pickup. And I requested about 5 or 6 books because I just went a little crazy. So not that one, but I did finally get to pick up 4 books. It took a while to get the books, I will say, which is understandable because they have to quarantine the books if they've been lent out recently. If they've been in the stacks for a while, they don't bother because no one's handled them for years. I learned this because I have an insider track at the library. Wink, wink. But yes, so I went to my library on Friday and I picked up these 4 books. So very exciting. I have Pride, Prejudice, and Other Flavors by Sonali Dev. And that's a Pride and Prejudice retelling. We've talked about her books before. I loved her Persuasion retelling. I picked up Middle Game by Shannon Maguire, which I've been wanting to read. I love Shannon Maguire's Wayward Children series. And I picked up The Wicker King by Kay Ankrum, which I'm reading now. And I love, love, love the cover. It's so pretty.
Oh, I like that.
And then randomly, because I'm in this book study, I think I've talked about before, where we read the book Stamped from the Beginning by Ibram Kendi. And we talk about it every month. We read a specific section. And last month, we talked about the section on Thomas Jefferson. And in that section, I learned a lot that I didn't know. And then it also came up that at one point, a representative from every state was asked to write kind of like a state of their state, like what's going on in Maryland, what's going on in Georgia, what's going on in Virginia. No one did it except Thomas Jefferson because he's, I guess, a nerd, but he wrote notes on the state of Virginia. And as I was reading the book, a lot of what he's talking about in Stamped, he's referring to what Jefferson said on Notes in the State of Virginia. And there's obviously a lot of evidence of his racism and just, you know, Jefferson is wrongly, I think, held up as, oh, well, he didn't really believe in slavery, but he owned slaves. And it's not really delved into more. And it's just like, no, he was a slave owner. He, you know, he believed in it. And we need to recognize that. But I just thought it would be interesting to actually read the source material for myself. And I don't know when I'll get to it or if I'll even do it. I kind of requested it on I'm going to be a student of history now and read this. But I would like to read through it a little bit and just, I don't know, learn more about what was going on at that time. So, yeah. Okay.
What did you pick up?
Well, on a friend's recommendation, I bought The Weight of the Stars by Kay Ankrum.
I'm a friend.
one of my smart, actively literate friends who has great taste kept saying how great it is, and I'm excited to find out for myself.
Your friend
So,
sounds
thank you, Julia.
yeah. Cool.
All right, so I have two recent acquisitions. The first was my Book of the Month box came yesterday, or the day before, one of those. And I got The Space Between Worlds by Micaiah Johnson. I think that's how I would pronounce it. And it's just a story about like multiverse and people traveling between different, universes. And I think it's got like, queer love story, and I've heard there's some good things about social justice in here. So I'm excited to read that. And then I was at the library because I was returning The Queen of the Sea and checking on a interlibrary loan that I had requested, which it's been 3 weeks and hasn't come in, again because everyone's quarantining their books for so long, which is fine. So I picked up another Alice Hoffman book since I was loving The Dove Keeper so much. So I got The Marriage of Opposites, and I'm really excited. It sounds really good.
I haven't read that one.
Oh yeah, it's not quite as long as The Dove Keepers. So. But yes, it sounds good. It's set in early 1800s, which is kind of neat.
Cool. Okay.
Oh, I've heard that apparently some people are microwaving their library books to kill COVID germs. So don't do that.
Don't do that.
That's very bad.
Oh my goodness. No, my library, what they do is every day they put out a box, and people, when they return books, or if they pick a book off the shelf and they don't end up taking it out, you put the returned or the touched books in the box, and then they seal it and they date it, do not open until 1 week later. So they have, these stacks of boxes that they're not opening for a whole week.
Wow. I would feel really guilty just browsing and just looking at books.
I was just like, I had to keep my hands behind my back, and I just had Goodreads out on my phone to kind of check synopses and things, because all I want to do is touch the books. That's all I want to do.
Yeah. I'm jealous you can go inside a library.
Yeah, I'm really lucky where I live. There's really, the COVID numbers are getting so much better. We're definitely on the downward.
That's good.
And, you have to wear your mask, and there's only a certain amount of people allowed in the library at a time. I mean, there was nobody there but me.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a Saturday morning. It was like 9 a.m. So.
Yeah. But I think it's good. We should support our libraries right now. Yeah. Okay, well, we are going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we have an amazing guest on the podcast. We have Adib Khorram, author of Darius the Great is Not Okay, and the upcoming sequel, Darius the Great Deserves Better. So we're so excited to talk to him. So stick around and we'll be right back. Okay, and we are back, and we have joining us Adib Khorram, author of Darius the Great is Not Okay and the forthcoming sequel, Darius the Great Deserves Better. Adib, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, we're so excited. We all absolutely love your book, and I'm so excited to read the second one. So we've just been so excited to talk to you.
Well, thank you so much. I'm really excited for the second one to come out soon.
I'm sure. Has it been a long time coming?
I guess, yeah, in some ways, yes, and in some ways, no. I mean, publishing always moves at its own pace. But it has definitely been weird to be anticipating a book coming out during the quarantines, for sure.
Right. I know a lot of books' release dates got pushed back a little. Was that the case for Darius, or was it always scheduled to come out in August?
We had always planned for it to be August 25th, and thankfully it did not get pushed. So
great.
It's just a little bit of luck on my part, I guess.
I would say also a little bit of luck on our part, because when this episode drops, it will be out in exactly 2 weeks. Very, very excited. I've had this pre-ordered for a long time. there's a really good chance I'm going to be sick that day.
Oh no. Well, I hope
I
you feel
know.
better soon and
Yes,
find something to do while you're homesick.
Yes. I mean, it just may be that your book could heal me. It might be actually magic. We'll
Yeah, it's
find
like,
out in 2 weeks.
it's almost like you'll be perfectly fine the next day. It'd be so weird.
I know.
It's a 24-hour thing.
Yeah, we live in a weird time. I think we should all just go with it.
Right.
But one of the things we always like to ask people, what are you reading?
Ooh, right now I am actually reading Felix Ever After by Kaysen Callender, which has been really delightful and fun. And I'm about halfway through and loving it, and also very stressed out about like what's going to happen because I just tend to get very, very invested in books. But yeah, like that's my current read.
We discussed that on our LGBTQ reads. I read it. It's fantastic.
Nice. Oh,
I was also stressed out for him a goodly chunk of
right.
them. I was stressed out for them. I'm sorry. But getting back to what we were discussing, how is the current time, like the pandemic, how has it changed your reading habits and or your writing habits?
Oh, well, it definitely basically destroyed my reading habits. I used to read an hour or two a day, and when the lockdown first happened, I kind of just didn't have it in me to do any reading at all. And so I went a couple months where I wasn't reading anything, and I still really struggle to read a book, but I've like started listening to audiobooks again. And I used to listen to audiobooks all the time on my commute, and since I no longer have a commute because I'm at home all the time, now I find myself listening to audiobooks and playing Animal Crossing because it's a good vibe.
Nice.
And as far as writing, I don't know, like my writing routine hasn't really changed any. I do just feel like the constant existential dread changed my relationship with getting work done, especially in like the early months. I was finishing up a draft of a book in, I guess, not even finishing, like I wrote a significant chunk of a draft of a book in like March, April, and May. And I am always going to feel super weird about that draft, I think, and maybe that book in general, just because of the time that it grew out of. But I don't know, I'm starting to, I guess, just be in this for the duration and like starting to alarmingly feel like this is the new normal and kind of making new routines.
Do you feel like the book that you wrote in March, April, and May was infused with themes or things that maybe wouldn't have been beforehand because of the pandemic and the quarantine?
I don't think so because I almost never outline, but in this case I was having a really tough time cracking the story, and so I did make myself a very sparse outline. And so I already knew what the story was going to be, and I definitely didn't consciously infuse any of what's going on.
Yeah.
Like it exists in a world that's either pre-COVID, non-COVID, or post-COVID. Like I do not really interact with it at all, and I don't know that I'll be able to interact with it for a couple of years until we see what the world looks like and how it affected young people. But it was just like, it was hard. Doing any work was really hard for the first few months of the quarantines.
Yeah. Understood.
Mm-hmm. And my last question is kind of a 2, maybe 3-parter. So sorry about that.
No, it's okay. You'll have to remind me of the subsequent parts because I can only hold one part of a question in my mind at a time.
I totally get that. I feel like my attention span and like thought retention is really just not great.
Mm-hmm.
So yay, COVID.
Just to circle back for a second, that was another thing that like how COVID has affected my writing processes. I feel like I can't hold a whole book in my mind anymore. And so I was constantly having to go back and like look at my notes and be like, did I already write this scene like 5 chapters ago? Am I hitting the same beats over and over again?
Oh.
So yeah, like I don't know if anyone ever watches What We Do in the Shadows, but they talk about the brain scramblies, and I feel like
Yes.
I've had the brain scramblies.
Yeah.
So this is probably something you are the only person that will get, but some friends of mine play Animal Crossing, and I guess some random people can just show up on your island. I'm pretty sure those people, those random people who are like computer generated that can show up, I'm pretty sure it's Colin Robinson.
Oh my gosh. Are you sure it's completely random? I know like people can visit your island in dreams now,
Oh.
and
Terrifying.
oh no, it's great because they visit like so they dream of your island and they can like see a version of it where they can't actually make any permanent effects on it, and then like you have villagers that come and camp, but there's no like Dilbert looking people like Colin Robinson that I have seen show up yet. But I do love Colin Robinson, and I just he makes me laugh so hard.
My friend Kim said there was like this random villager, and she thinks it might have been like generated by the game, and she doesn't like him. She finds him boring. She threw him in a hole.
Oh my gosh, did you use a pitfall seed?
I think so.
Yeah,
And
that's
I
great.
I don't know anything about Animal Crossing, so I just sort of have my own idea of it,
Oh.
which is probably not at all related to the actual game. So when you're like, oh, people can visit in dreams, and I'm like, Freddy Krueger's there somehow too. This is
Oh, no, it's
very
great.
exciting for me.
Yeah, it's a delight. It's very delightful and very zen, and it's really, especially when everything was in like full lockdown here in Kansas City. It was like the only way I could visit friends was to visit their Animal Crossing islands, and it was very fun.
This seems like the first step towards us living in a completely virtual reality.
Pretty much.
Yeah. I have to get into it. I haven't yet.
Oh,
It sounds super fun.
it's very zen.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, but anyway, would you give anyone who hasn't read Darius the Great is Not Okay a super quick synopsis? And also, why did you decide to do a sequel?
Oh, I don't know that I've ever tried to like synopsize the whole story before. I usually just give like my pitch. Um, okay, so obviously, spoiler alert then for the subsequent sentences I'm about to speak, which I am just now going to make up right now. Go. Um, so Darius the Great is Not Okay is about a teenage boy named Darius Kellner who is Iranian American and lives in Portland, Oregon. And he lives with depression, as does his father, who he doesn't really get along with, except for when they watch Star Trek every night. And he's kind of lonely and bullied at school and doesn't really have any friends. And works at a little like a Tivana-esque shop, which is probably a parody. I don't know. Don't worry about it. But he still has family back in Iran, and they talk over Skype sometimes, but he's never met them face to face. But when his grandfather gets sick, he and the family go to Iran to visit for the first time. And while he's there, he makes friends with his grandparents' neighbor, who's a boy named Sohrab, who becomes his first like really true friend. And Sohrab shows him around Yazd, the city in Iran where Darius's family lives. They go on little adventures. They play soccer. They get into fights sometimes, but then they make up after. And Darius also connects with his family in a way that he never really has before. Gets an understanding of his heritage, and really just has this whole sense of self transformed by the visit. But then at the end, he has to go home. And I should also mention that while he's there in Iran, he and his dad also come to a better understanding of each other as well. That's kind of a key point. But so he eventually has to go back home, and he tries to carry a little of kind of his newfound sense of self with him as he kind of returns back to normal life in high school.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like that's an okay synopsis.
That was
End
such a great
spoilers.
synopsis. Yeah.
That was perfect.
Yeah.
That was hard. Usually it's just like, here's why you should want to read the book, and that's
Yeah.
all anyone wants to know.
Well,
And I'm
we'll
just like,
put
it's tea, it's Star Trek, it's Iranian food. What more do you need?
the scenes where he and his dad are watching Star Trek together really struck me as it's such neutral territory for them both, and the only times in the beginning of the book where they feel, both of them, I feel like, feel comfortable. And I also was struck because my dad and I used to watch Star Trek Next Generation together too, and I always associate that show with my dad. And then I read another book by Mike Chan, Here and Now and Back Again, I think is the title. And in that book, there is a father-daughter relationship, and they watch Star Trek Next Generation. And I just think there must be something about that show that brings dads and their kids together. I don't know.
Maybe there is a generation of kids who grew up watching that show with their parents or grandparents. Like in my case, I watched it with my grandma every Thursday, which is when it came on in Kansas City. But there's a generation of us who have like that memory, and now a generation of us who, if they're anything like me, had a very like alarming moment where they were doing some mental math and realized that like we'd become like our parents' age, and we're no longer teenagers' age, we're parents' age now. And so I was like, oh my God, I'm closer to Steven's age than I am to Darius's age. And I had to lay down on the floor and like have an existential crisis. But I was like, well, you know, if I was a parent, I'd probably make my child watch Star Trek reruns with me. And
Right.
so that's what Darius and his dad are going to do. And I think maybe there's just a lot of us all having these same existential crises.
Probably, yes.
The march of time is very alarming sometimes.
So what inspired you to write the sequel, and what is there anything, without spoiling it for us, what can we expect in the sequel?
Ooh. So as far as what inspired it, I don't know that anything necessarily inspired it so much as I found my brain frequently wandering back to Darius and wondering what he was up to. To a certain extent, I like knew some of what his life had in store for him, just because that was necessary for me to write the ending of the first book, just to see where his path was going to lead him, just so I could like decide where to leave him. But after that, I started work on a completely different standalone YA contemporary project. Wrote it, finished it, sent it in to my agent, and she called me after she'd read it, and she's like, how honest do you want me to be? And I was like, oh, please be very honest, because I was feeling very like uncertain about it. And she was like, I really loved all these characters and I like the ideas that you're exploring, but I don't think this book has a plot. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's exactly what's wrong with it. What is the plot? And she's like, I don't know either. That's the problem. If I knew how to fix
I knew I forgot something.
And we had this like really long talk about like neither of us really knew how to fix it. And so we decided we just needed to backburner it and work on something else. And not too long before this, I was doing some school visits with my editor, visiting schools in Washington, D.C., and then we did like a bookstore event afterward. And someone in the audience asked if I was ever going to write a sequel. And at the time I had no plans. And so I was like, I don't know, maybe if people want it. And my editor was in the back row of the audience giving me 2 thumbs up, like, yes, you should do it. And so after writing this other disaster book, I told the story of this to my agent, Molly, and she's like, oh, well, what would a sequel be about? And I apparently in the back of my mind had some ideas. And so I told her, and she's like, oh, why don't you try like writing that? And so I did, and it worked out. So basically I wrote the sequel because the other thing I wrote was terrible. And as far as what is in it, it picks up about 6 months after the end of Darius the Great is Not Okay, and it finds Darius back at home in Portland in his junior year of high school. He's dating a boy named Landon and working at his dream job, interning at a tea shop. And he's on the soccer team and has friends. But his family is kind of financially recovering from their trip to Iran. His parents are both frazzled from working all the overtime. His dad is kind of having a depressive episode. His sister is getting bullied at school. His dad's parents, his dad's moms, are coming to stay with him to kind of help take care of the family. And even though Darius has everything he told himself he wanted, he still feels dissatisfied. And so, if you can't tell, I'm still waiting for someone to tell me what my book is about. um, but yeah, like, I don't know. I feel like the first one was really easy to distill into a little nugget of like going to Iran, and this one is a little harder to distill into a nugget.
It sounds just like another really important step in a young person's just journey towards becoming an adult, right? Like you get everything that you thought you wanted, but you still might not be fully happy, or it doesn't solve everything, right? And that's a hard lesson to learn. And it's one that I feel like I still struggle with as an adult. And so I think that's just so relatable, as the first one was so relatable, sort of finding yourself as a young person.
Yeah. And I think, I don't know if anyone else ever felt this way, but when I was a teenager, like I would have all these goals for myself, and sometimes they were grandiose and impossible, and sometimes they were grandiose and possible. And sometimes I would achieve them and then feel trapped by them, because I was like, oh, I said I wanted this. Everyone like identified me with this thing that I said I wanted, but it's not making me happy. How do I get out of it? And I guess I still sometimes feel that way as an adult, but I think less so. The older I get, the less worries I have about like what other people think of me.
Yeah.
But certainly, like, for Darius, he feels very like trapped in his own self-definition and has to learn how to break out of that.
Yeah. Wow. I can't wait to read it. I loved in the first book all of the just Iranian and Persian culture and language that was in the book. And, I feel like when I was reading it, I learned so much that I didn't know. And, some of the things about language, especially, I thought were really beautiful and interesting. How, especially when talking about family, I didn't know that in Persian language, if the name for a family member is the relationship, right? Like, Damshi, right, can be the uncle or the nephew, I think. Did I get that? Daid, that's right. And so I just thought that was beautiful how you incorporated that. Was that something that was important to make sure was in the book to you?
I don't know that important's the right word. It was necessary.
Mm-hmm.
That is part of who Darius is, and that is part of who I am as an Iranian American. And so I don't think I deliberately set out to share my culture with outsiders so much as to illuminate my culture for insiders and let them feel seen. And there was just kind of a secondary hope that other people would understand and appreciate it as well. But that was never my primary concern.
More to be a mirror for kids. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I also just loved the representation of family and how Darius comes to understand his family more during the trip to Iran, like you said. And there's one really beautiful part where he meets his grandmother for the first time, and she hugs him and won't let go. And I think you write, for her, love was an opportunity, not a burden. And that just was such a beautiful scene. So.
Oh, thank you. Most of my family lives in Vancouver, British Columbia, and I only get to see them like once a year, and I haven't even gotten to see them this year because of COVID. But there is I tried to distill that feeling of, seeing family that you almost never get to see, and imagine what it'd be like to get to hug someone you've never gotten to hug before.
Yeah.
And capture that, because I think that's something that a lot of children of diaspora feel and experience one way or another. Yeah.
And also the book obviously deals with a lot of heavy topics, depression, and were you thinking of, I think a lot of young kids or kids who are reading this book and who are also going through that, I think would really relate to Darius, and I think this is a great book for them to read. Were you thinking about those readers as you wrote the book? And do you hear from kids who've read the book and felt like they appreciated that?
I do sometimes hear from kids, or like talk to them at school visits, and that's always very rewarding. And I do think I was much more intentional about how I was um, interacting with mental health.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Partially because I grew up with depression and still live with it and wanted to explore what it's like to live with it. And partially because when I first started writing the book back in 2015, and I feel like 2014 and 2015 saw, like, I guess even 2013 too, just saw a bunch of books about suicide,
Mm-hmm.
about like revenge suicide or romantic suicide, or people who were, survivors of people who died by suicide, brothers or sisters or family members. And I felt that that was gross. And especially any of the ones that kind of romanticize suicide, I, I was like, this is gross. And my mental health struggles aren't like romantic for you.
Right.
Um, and so I wanted to change the narrative on that and write about how it is, in fact, the kind of thing you can and many people do live with. So, yeah, I think a lot of that just came from annoyance with what I was seeing from other books.
Yeah, I think it was so well done in your book. I thought it was great
Well, thank you.
representation. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I
Definitely.
could sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I was going to say just definitely a lot of it came from a place of my own experiences.
Yeah.
I could very much see how it manifested in the way Darius would respond to things in a conversation where he was just kind of keeping himself very distant from it, where he would be like, okay. Or, like just like one word kind of answers, or just like, oh. But in his head, he had all these thoughts and, all these things he wanted to say, but he couldn't really get them out.
Right. I think being like living with depression puts kind of a lens on your worldview, and just being a teenager is its own lens. And when you combine those two, it can be really, really hard to escape those skewed views of the world.
Probably my favorite sort of part of the book was the sort of climax of his the way his relationship with his dad unfolded. I mean, Darius was not okay, and neither was I. I think I got dehydrated reading that scene. I was crying so much. It was so just so emotional and just very deep conversation they were having, and where his dad finally opened up about his own struggles and the reasons of this is why I am the way I am. And I just wanted to talk about that because I just thought it was so beautiful and such an incredible scene. And I mean, I don't even know if I have a question. I just had to bring it up because it was so great.
Thank you. I really worked hard on that. And I think just as, my existential crisis about how I was closer in age to Darius's dad than to Darius led to the Star Trek thing, it also led to a lot more empathy to how Stephen was interacting with his son, and where he was trying and where he was failing and not realizing he was failing. And I think, I don't know, that happened. I don't have any kids, but I imagine if I ever do, that I will love them more fiercely than anything and still manage to mess up frequently, and sometimes just need them to tell me that I'm messing up and let me know I need to do better. And I also think, from Darius's point of view, one of the hallmarks of being a teenager is learning how to see that your parents have a life outside of you. And that's something that Darius has like a very stark realization of in that moment, because he'd only ever seen his dad through his own relationship. And suddenly he's like seeing that his dad is going through stuff and, you know, is in fact a completely separate person from him. I don't know. I feel like that's something we all experience at some point or another.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All the relationships in the book I felt like were developed so well. And Darius himself just goes through this, character arc where by the end he's sort of opening up and kind of getting out of his shell a little more, while at the same time he's not changing. He's still true to himself. And I think a good example of that is, his gym teacher, whoever, says, wow, are you going to try out for the soccer / non-American football team? And Darius is like, yeah, maybe, but not if it gets in the way of my internship at the tea shop, because that's more important. So I just thought that was a really good just picture of how far he's come, where he's at now.
Thank you. Yeah. I think, I don't know. I think one of the things that always like strikes me about Darius, and one of the ways that I wish I was more like him, is that sense of self that he has, which I definitely did not have when I was a teenager. And people always ask me if like Darius is me, and no, he is way more put together than I ever was. But that was, I don't know, I really like that about him.
Yeah.
He's so funny too. I want to just mention that because obviously the book is emotional and deals with all these topics, but he is so funny. The things that he says out loud and in his head, and all the names he has for things. Like he calls his dad an Ubermensch. He calls the bullies at school soulless minions of orthodoxy. Just so funny and smart. I just love Darius so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That was very fun. I feel like teenagers are just very funny.
Yeah.
They're quick-witted, and they're kind of uniquely situated to find the ironies in life.
Yeah.
That we as adults often gloss over because we're like, oh, that's just the way it is.
Yeah.
But, teenagers who are experiencing it for the first time are like, no, this is ridiculous and messed up. Why does anyone do this?
Yeah.
I'm going to make fun of it.
Yeah.
It's like this line, it was like on page 4, but it said, talking about Trent being a bully, and it said, and if everyone at Chapel Hill High School tolerated Trent's behavior, that meant he wasn't a bully, right? Because of the zero tolerance policy for bullying, even though it happened all the time.
Oh, I have very long-winded and fraught thoughts about, the way our school systems deal with a lot of things, including bullying, and the efficacy of zero tolerance policies, and the sports ball industrial complex, which I feel like governs a lot of schools.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly in the Midwest and in the South, where the pigskin is king.
Yeah. Yep, definitely. Well, are we going to get any more Darius books?
There's nothing in the works right now. Maybe if this one does well,
Mm-hmm.
and I come up with a good story for a third one, I'll get to write it. But I'm not working on a third one right now. I'm working on some other projects, which I don't think I can really talk about right now, but I'm very excited for them.
Cool. We'll keep our eyes out for that then. And we always ask our guests to recommend something that we should read, since our podcast is called What You Should Read. So what should we read?
I am very excited for an anthology that comes out next month. I want to say it's in September. I'm like 99% certain it's September, called Vampires Never Get Old, edited by Zoraida Cordova and Natalie C. Parker. It's a bunch of short stories that are doing fresh takes on vampires, and it's delightful. I'm also really excited for Julian Winter's The Summer of Everything, which also comes out next month. I feel like all the things I'm excited about are in September.
There's a lot of good stuff coming out this fall. Yeah.
I feel like that's as far ahead as I am capable of looking right now, because we're all circling in the eye of the bear me.
Yeah.
And then I'm also I'm also really excited for Tessa Gratton's Night Shine, which is like a dark queer response to Howl's Moving Castle, which literally are like, that sentence alone just makes me want to read it. So yeah, I think that's what I'm looking out for right now.
Great. I love vampire stories, so I'm excited about that anthology. Yeah.
Oh, it's so good. There's also a little podcast. I say little. There is a podcast with it, like a companion podcast where Natalie and Zoraida are interviewing the anthologists and discussing popular vampire media. Like Natalie, Zoraida, and Julie Murphy discussed the Twilight movies and books a couple episodes ago, and it was absolutely hilarious.
I will have to look that up. We actually just talked about that for the intro for this episode because Midnight Sun came out. And
it just dropped.
Right. And so we were just talking about a lot of different things to talk about with Twilight. But yeah, I'll have to check that out then.
Oh, it's hilarious.
Oh, that's great. Is there anything else you want to plug, like social media or your website?
Ooh, I will plug that I also, for people who read picture books or have children that like picture books, I have a picture book coming out in February of 2021 about Nowruz. It's called 7 Special Somethings, a Nowruz story. Aww. And it's very adorable, and I'm really excited to share that with all my cousins' kids because they're all like right at the picture book age right now. So I get to be like the cool cousin once removed. So that'll be great. Also, there's a pre-order campaign going on. You can go to adibkhorram.com/pre-order or find links on my Twitter or Instagram where I'm at Adib Khorram, and you get little art cards that are very adorable if you pre-order the book or purchase it in the first week or request it from your library. Basically from anywhere. I'm like super chill.
That's great.
And I'm also doing a bunch of virtual launch events, which also I think are linked on my website and also on Penguin Teen, and I think fairly easy to find links for it. Links are so long these days.
Yeah. I will add them as hyperlinks in the show notes so people can just click and go right to it.
Perfect. That's so much more efficient than me spelling out bit.ly.
Right. Oh, that's so funny. Well, thank you so much again for joining us. We really appreciate it. This was great.
Thank you so much for having me. This was so fun.
Great. Well, thank you again for joining us to Adib Khorram. And you can follow us on social media, Instagram and Twitter, WYSR_podcast. You can email us at whatyoushouldreadpodcast@gmail.com. And you can find us on Goodreads, where we, make bookshelves for every episode. So if we mention a book and you can't remember what it is and you want to find it, just go to our Goodreads page. And be sure to rate us and review us on iTunes and anywhere where you listen to your podcasts.
And now you know what you should read.
You're welcome.